Folks, if you did not see the first episode, you need to go back. Okay. That's what you need to do. First of all, go back and see that first episode because we have got a second episode with Dr. Charlene Belton Gonzalez. She's the St. Croix superintendent. We talked about how you kind of create a blue ribbon culture. We talked about some of the work that is going on in some of the campuses there about creating a blue ribbon culture. In our second episode, we really want to dig down into like, and this is leadership 101, like how do you really start that process? There are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of books on how to start that process. And what we like to do is we like to sit down and really talk to administrators on how they have started that process and then building a culture and how then what has been some of the amazing achievement that is actually going on in the district, folks. One thing before we get started, Dr. Daggett taught me this. He says that every organization has its own DNA, right? And if you've got to find that DNA before you really get a true understanding of then how to build systems around it. So, Doc, we've got the second question is, we talked in the first episode about how you really started with, giving the level of support, the level of nurture, and really the data gathering that you actually started in your first days at St. Croix. Talk us through that process. What are some things that you saw? Maybe some successes, maybe even some roadblocks that then you had to come back and say, okay, like we all do in leadership, to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then how has that really been progressing in St. Croix?
Yes, of course.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that you have to find out what the DNA of an organization is. I
Right.
completely agree with that because me coming from the mainland,
Mhm.
and even though the Virgin Islands is a territory of the United States, it's very, very different and the culture is different. And so I couldn't have a mentality that I was just going to go in and just change everything. I had to take time to understand the climate and culture and then move accordingly. And so, just like I mentioned in the first episode, that it really and truly was data collection. I had to get to know the people that I was working with and start the foundation of building positive and collaborative working relationships. And so I also had to learn individual strengths and how I could support in helping them just shine in their strengths. And so I had to look at various programs, and data's huge. You have to look at the data and you have
Right.
to look and see what's working. You have to look and see what you may have to tweak, and then you have to look and see what some things you might just have to completely throw out.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, so but the main thing I would say is that you just have to keep the students at the forefront of everything. Like you
Mm.
have to keep their growth and their achievement at the head of any decision making. And so, sometimes this can be difficult for adults because as adults, we still want to do what's comfortable for
Mm.
us. And so, and change is difficult. It can be hard. But in changing habits in adults, when you've been doing something for a long time, that can be equally as hard. But I can go to sleep at night knowing that if we made a decision that's based off the needs of our students,
Right.
then we're going for it. But as far as like our culture with our blue ribbon schools, we just have the one. We have 10 schools across the St. Croix district, and we have the one. But I would like to see us have more blue ribbon schools and really put St. Croix on the map. But for us now, I would say it's just been continuously looking at our goals and looking at what we're doing and assessing and monitoring. Sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board and throw out a plan and start all over. And sometimes you just build on something. But it's just keeping the end in mind and keeping those goals of the district and the goals of the campuses in mind, just so that we can make sure that we actually accomplish our goals and that we know at any given point, any given time, where we stand.
Definitely, definitely. as you were talking, just words in my mind thought, yeah, I thought of the words like in continuous improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I counted the word data. I think you said the word data about 6 times, right? I think it's, this data gathering, this continuous improvement. How do we, as a leader, how do I really look at some of the great things that are going on? How do we make those better? And then how do we look at the data and say, okay, these are some things that we put a lot, maybe we put things into, but they're things that maybe we should actually sunset, right? And as leaders, we've got to sit and make that communication. I think one thing you talked about was communication early in the first episode, and even communication in this episode, and keeping the children the main thing.
At the
I
forefront.
heard that at least 4 to 5 times, right? Definitely.
Exactly. And making sure, excuse me, making sure that everyone, all the stakeholders are involved. And even if it has to be over communication,
Right.
communication is essential. And we just have to keep in mind too that one person cannot do it all alone,
No,
all alone.
no,
It takes an entire team. And so as
exactly.
leaders, we're finding the strengths in our team members. And as I said, when we were just kind of talking before, everybody comes to the table with their own unique set of talents and
Right.
experiences. And I talked about, it's like a buffet.
Yeah.
Everybody's got something that they're bringing to the table.
Right.
But, as leaders, we just have to empower, encourage, and motivate the individuals on our team so that they can utilize their superpowers
I
for
love
the
it.
greater good of the team. And so,
Uh,
and that all involves trust. And trust, it doesn't just come just like this. You've got to
right.
build trust. People have to know that you care, and they have to know that you have their best interests at heart, and that you're there to support. Because basically, when it comes down to it, as leaders, our job is to make everybody else shine.
Exactly. Exactly. You know what, Dr. Belton Gonzalez, I'm tracking what you're saying, right? Okay. The first thing we talked about, you talked about like really looking for the DNA of St. Croix, right? To really get a good understanding of the strengths, areas of growth. Then you've talked about then really looking the second piece as leaders, we've got to see, okay, what is everyone's superpower, right? Everyone who's working on that team has a superpower. And as a leader, we've got to figure out what those superpowers are, right? How can they, and then sometimes, as we know, I might have a superpower, but I'm not using it. How do we make
Exactly.
sure that individuals are using their superpower? Go ahead. Go ahead. You want to
Yeah,
say something?
yeah, I was just agreeing with you, and I was just going to say sometimes people don't even know what they're good at. And so it's up
Right.
to us as leaders to draw that out of them and support
Exactly.
that superpower.
And when you say that, that's where the growth, like when you're working for someone and they make you feel like you're growing in their organization, then you want to continue to work for that person, right? That's that communication piece that you talked about. And then that other piece that you talked about is, okay, through all of that, right? Children. We're here to ensure that our children are successful, and then going back to the episode 1 and doing everything that we can do to nurture and support our children, right?
Exactly.
Folks, you better get on over there. If you can, you better get to St. Croix, folks. Amazing work that's going on in St. Croix. We're going to be having Dr. Natasha Halloran at our NDPC conference, really talking through some of the processes. And Doc, I just want to thank you for this second episode. And folks, we've got one more episode with Dr. Belton Gonzalez. She's going to be giving you advice. I mean, if you are looking at being a leader, maybe a new superintendent, what is some advice that Dr. I'm going to say Dr. G is going to be giving you? Dr. G is going to be giving
At
you
St.
going
Croix,
forward.
they started calling me Super G.
Super G, I love that.
A t-shirt made. One of my friends here in Dallas makes t-shirts, so
Yeah,
I
Super
got a
G.
Super G t-shirt.
Super G t-shirt. That's what hey, I'm gonna start the next episode with Super G. All right. But folks, make sure that if you haven't seen the first one, go back and see that. You've seen the second one, and then follow us on over to the third episode. All right. Thanks a bunch, Doc, and we'll get on to that third episode.